All right, can they hear me okay? Are we ready? Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay. All right, so today I've been asked to talk a little bit about livestock, but first I'm going to start off kind of with my story and kind of how we got started, kind of some of the hoops we've had to jump through and things like that. So back in about 2015, we ended up with, I actually bought a pet rabbit for Brandon, and this was back before we knew anything about livestock or farming. And I thought it was so cool because I found this rabbit that looked like it was Siamese, you know. Come to find out after doing research, it's a California rabbit. They all look like that. So it wasn't anything special. But after kind of researching, I always like to find those weird and different animals, you know, and so I ended up looking for the biggest rabbit in the world, you know, and so I came across the Flemish giant rabbit at the time. And so I ended up buying one. This is back when we lived over in Pine and Strawberry, and I found one over here in Snowflake. And so came over here, bought one, took it home, and it was my pet. It lived in the house. And anyway, about probably a year later, we ended up moving over here into Lakeside. And so then Brandon and I decided, you know, maybe we should look into farming. You know, this is kind of cool. We should raise rabbits, you know, for meat. And so we started kind of getting into it. I bought more Flemish Giants, and then I found that they weren't like the best producing rabbits for meat. And so we kind of ended up getting into the Rex rabbits. So we ended up coming across quite a few different quality of rabbits. And so I started learning a little bit more here and there. And we started raising rabbits for show. I didn't even know people showed rabbits. You know, I was like, what do you do? Like run around a circle with it? I don't, you know. And so we ended up doing really well. And we did it for about 5 years. We ended up having our own bloodlines and everything. We had grand champion rabbits. But then unfortunately we had neighbor dogs come in and destroyed that dream. So we lost all of our rabbits. And so then we tried to get back up and going, but because we had been doing it for so long, it was really hard to get started again to find the quality that we had worked so hard for. So that's when we decided we wanted to kind of move forward in farming and look for different animals that we wanted to raise for meat and other things as well. So we kind of got a little bit into a few goats, and we got a few pigs, and then we got into chickens. And so we kind of had a little bit of variety of everything. That didn't stay. So anyway, we'd moved and we lived on an acre in Vernon, and that's where we kind of did a lot of testing. And this is where we did a lot of trial and error and learned a ton about what we actually want to do with farming. So we tried all different types of fencing. We tried all different types of animals. Within those animals, we tried the different types of those animals, the different, you know, like with the goats, we started out with La Manchas, then we got Toggenburgs, then we got Nubians, and we kind of tested out each breed until we found something that worked best for us. And so we lived there for about 5 years, and we've been testing every different type of animal until we found exactly what worked for us. And then we tested the fencing on each one, and we found out what kind of fencing worked for us. And, you know, we've had, that's just not going to stay, is it? So then we had where we got to a point where we were ready to expand. And so about a year and a half ago, we decided to sell our property, and we moved to Concho, just off of Concho Highway. And we ended up getting 36 acres. And so we've done a ton of work since then. We put in about 8,000 feet of fencing, which now after we've tried the welded wire, which with goats, if you guys have had goats, we keep horns on our goats, and they get a horn in there and they break the welds and they just destroy the fence really quickly. So we actually went with the woven wire, and that seems to do very well. We did have a goat that his name was Wrecker. He lived up to his name, and he would ram the fence every rut and hit it and hit it and hit it and hit it until he could break through. And we had him through our rut season over at the new property, and he never broke through that fence. It's still standing today. So anyway, pretty much when you start farming with animals, you're going to go through trial and error and have to find out what's going to work best and fix things that aren't working. And so that's kind of where we are now. We're now on our property. We've got the right animals, the right breed of each animal that we want that's working best for us. So that's just kind of our story of how we are right here. Does anybody have questions so far?
Tell everybody your name and your
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Sarah. We are Fish or Price Ranch. My maiden name is Fish. Brandon's is Price. We just recently married, so now I am officially Price. But that is how we came up with our name. So thank you. Okay, so we'll talk about trying to figure out the right livestock for you. So kind of what I talked about, it's always good to test out different breeds and test out different reasons to have each animal. So a lot of times I'll tell people to find other farmers near you to go out and see what kind of animals they raise and how they raise them. A lot of farmers are more than willing to show you, you know, how they raise the animals and what type they raise. We love to talk about our animals, and we'll talk all day. So it's not hard to find a farmer that's willing to share, you know, kind of their life with their animals. So I always recommend that people go out and they find, check out different breeds of each animal, go to each different farm if you can, and then find out which one may work for you or may not. You know, goats may not be your thing. Maybe they're too loud, or they're too obnoxious, they're too destructive, or they're just not exactly what you're looking for. Maybe they're too big, you know, or not big enough. So I always recommend that. Also, finding a good mentor through those farmers is always nice, because a lot of farmers are willing to help you, even if you know, they only met you once. You know, if you have questions, a lot of them are willing to answer those questions. And when you come to a problem and they raise that specific type of animal, they might have an answer for you, and most of them are willing to help you out there. So then it comes to, once you figure out what type of animal you want to find reputable breeders. So you want to find good breeders that are well known. They take really good care of their stock. And, you know, you don't want to just buy from just anybody, because, you know, everybody's different on how they raise their animals. And you don't want to just buy some, you know, small pen where they're compacted in there and they're just breeding just because to make some money. You know, we don't know if those animals are healthy. So you want to find somebody that has a good reputation for raising quality stock. So whenever you do bring stock home, I always recommend that you quarantine them, because even if they say, like whenever I purchase an animal, and they, let's say with goats, they disease test them, even though they've disease tested them, I still will quarantine them for a few weeks, make sure they're not sick. We don't want to bring anything into our herd or into our soil, and we'll disease test them again, because I want to make sure that they're going to be a good, healthy animal before they join my herd that I've worked super hard for. I don't want to end up destroying, you know, what I've already established. And then so like mostly we do goats. We do have rabbits that we raise for meat and pelts, and then we have pigs that we raise for meat. We have chickens for meat and eggs, and we have turkeys also. But our main focus is our goats. Like Anita said, we've brought in the Kiko goat breed to Arizona. There's only one other breeder in the entire state, and but we are the largest breeder in the state. We've spent a lot of time and money, research, and we've brought in goats from all over, from as far east as Virginia, far north as Washington, and we're only bringing in top quality breeders. And so, you know, when we disease test our goats, it's very important, because we don't want them bringing in anything. So anyway, we draw the blood ourselves and we send it to the lab and wait for results before they'll join the herd. But that's really important to us to make sure that we stay a disease-free herd. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay. So I do like to talk about like the real cost of farming. A lot of people don't know this. So whenever you go to look for a goat for sale, for instance, I get this a lot. I have a lot of people, I'm looking for a goat for about 50 bucks. I'm like, good luck to you. You know, because let's say you bought, on the low end, you bought a $200 goat, male, a buck, and then you bought a doe for the same price. So you spent $400 for that one pair. And typically you don't buy adults. A lot of people sell their kids. And so you've bought 2 kids. Now you have to raise them for a year and a half before you can breed that pair. So you have to feed them and house them for that long and take care of them, any medical supplies, vet care, anything that they need. And now you breed them. So now that they're bred, it takes 5 months gestation before they're going to have a kid. And so after that 5 months, then they're usually typically on the dam for, I typically do 12 weeks. Some people will wean them at 8 weeks, and then they're ready for sale. I've spent a lot more than 50 bucks for that one little kid right there. So sometimes you get lucky and you will get a cheap goat, but a lot of times there's a reason they're that cheap. Maybe they're not disease testing, maybe they're not of quality. And so you just have to look at all that the factors. And that's why I always recommend a good reputable breeder. Yes, like we spend on average of $800 to $1,000 for one goat, but I know that that's quality, you know, and it's going to take a long time for me when I first got started to realize what quality looks like, because not every goat is equal. Not every goat should be a breeder. You know, a lot of them, 90% of them should go in the freezer, you know, and so it takes a little bit of time and patience to learn what to look for. And like we've talked about all day, the record keeping is very, very important. So like with our goats, the Kiko breed is a performance tested breed. They're not a show goat. And so we're looking at performance as far as, because they're typically just a meat goat to everybody. So we want to see really fast growth. And so we're going to be testing, you know, we're going to weigh them at birth, and then we're going to weigh them again at least 90 days old, because that's when they wean. And we want to see that they have a really good growth rate. A really good one for a Kiko is about a half a pound a day. And that's, you know, our goats have been grass fed for all up until a couple days ago. With the inflation and everything, we've had to change up feed just a little bit. And so we have added some oats and barley and some Boss black oil sunflower seeds into their diet, just to kind of offset a little bit of the cost. So anyway, record keeping is really important. And so that's what we do with the Kikos. We also will again weigh them at 150 days old, and then again at 1 year if we have them that long. And it just helps, you know, show, it's really nice, because what we'll do is we'll weigh all the babies. We'll typically have 30, 40, 50 kids born every year. And then we'll weigh every single one at birth and every one at 90 days. And then 150 days if we have them that long in 1 year. And then the next year we'll have the same amount of kids, but maybe we've added in new genetics, bigger genetics, or what have you. And then we do the same thing, and then we can compare it to last year and see if we're gaining or if we're losing. Maybe the buck we just bought that we spent $3,000 on gave us the smallest kids we've ever had. We know he's not worth $3,000 and we've lost out. You know, it happens. Or it could be the other way around. So record keeping is really important. And then as far as, so we'll kind of go on like fencing and housing for the animals. Mostly, you know, like I say, we do goats, but I've realized that with the welded wire fencing, we do the 2x4 inch squares. Almost no animal can fit through that, especially even like our goat kids, their heads can't fit through, so we don't have to worry about heads getting stuck in the fence. If you look at bigger fencing like field fencing, where you get the big six inch squares at the top, a goat can easily fit their head through there. If they have horns, they can get stuck, strangle themselves, or they're just stuck all day screaming their head off. So, and we did have that at our last property. We did try the goat and sheep fencing, which is a 4x4 square. None of the adults got their head stuck, but the babies would. So we still had that problem too. So we've learned that 2x4 holes on the fencing is kind of your best bet for pretty much any animal. The only thing that we have that squeezes through it is our chicks, because our chicken's free range. So occasionally they start running around in the orchard. And then housing. So with the goats, we typically just keep pretty much a 3-sided shelter with a roof, and we make sure the opening is facing away from the wind. We don't want them to get wet or have to deal with the wind. With the breed that we raise, they have a lot of cashmere, so they have a good thick fur in the wintertime, and we typically don't have to worry about them getting too cold. That's one of the reasons why I went with the Kiko goats. We've tried, like I said, the Nubians and the Toggenburgs and La Manchas and all that, and those are all great goats, but their hair is really, really thin, and we'd have to deal with sweaters on the kids, heat lamps, all that stuff, insulated housing and stuff. With the Kikos, we've had them 2 years ago when we lived in Vernon, which is much cooler than down here. We had a doe that kidded when it was -5 at 9 o'clock at night. And she had triplets. And so I was out there, of course, drying off the babies. And the main thing was, I'm hearing feedback. Okay. Anyway, so the main thing was the ears. We didn't want them to get frostbite. So we had to make sure the ears were nice and dry. But I really wanted to test out this breed, and -5 degrees, they were just born. Made sure that they were dry, they were nursing, and I went inside, went to bed. And next day they're out there running around playing in the snow. And we have, knock on wood, I don't see any in here, but we have never lost a Kiko goat to the weather, which is really nice. They're super hardy. So anyway, the housing for them is pretty simple. As long as they can get out of the wind and the rain, typically most animals can survive that. We just had that with the pigs. We have the Kuni pigs, and we had a litter that was born 3 weeks ago, I think. And it had just started to get cool, and I was a little bit worried because it was going to be in the 30s that night, and we're off grid. We don't have a way to get heat out there. We'd have to run like 5 extension cords all the way out into their pasture, and it's really hard to give them heat. So we just gave them a whole bunch of hay. Straw is pretty good because it is more insulated. I don't typically like straw because we end up with a lot of mites that can hide inside the straw because it's hollow. So we've quit using straw. We typically will use pine shavings instead. We didn't have any, so we just took some of the Bermuda hay that we feed the goats, and we just filled it full of that. And anyway, we went out there the next morning. I kind of half thought, we're going to go out to dead piglets, and nope, they're all running around just fine. So they were nice and hardy as well. So they just had that good shelter to keep out of the wind, and have a good bedding in there, and they seem to do pretty good.
Piglets are those, or pigs are those.
Kuni? Yeah.
I read some on it, but I don't understand why people have it.
So they are a smaller breed. So we have had Hampshires, Durocs. We had a couple of crosses, and then we've tried the Kunis. These ones are nice because they don't get huge, and they have a little bit more hair on them, so they're a little bit better in the cooler temperatures. But also, if you notice, their snouts are really short, and we'll put them out on. They're on 1 acre right now, and we have some grass out there, and they do not kill the pasture. They don't uproot it everywhere like other pigs do. We had first started with a couple different pigs. They were a Kuni cross, and we had them out there, and they destroyed all our grass. They uprooted it, eat all the roots, And so once we got rid of those, we got the purebreds, and they have not killed any of our grass. So they seem to be a pretty good, yeah. And they're probably, our biggest one's probably about that big, and he's full grown. And their pork is really dark red.
And it's really good.
Oh yeah, really good. Yeah. So, yeah. That's a good question. I would say at least 150 animals. We have about 60 chickens. We have 3, 4, 5, 6 pigs, 2 turkeys. We have 57 goats. But it's okay, 27 of them are pregnant. So we'll have plenty more soon. And then we have our 5 livestock guardian dogs, and then we have 3 Mouser cats. Yeah. So then once you've like established what kind of animals you want, you've got good fencing and housing, you have to decide what you want to use the animals for. So like with the goats, like the Kiko goats, they're a great meat breed. And a lot of the breeders that I talk to that also raise the Kikos, that's all they use them for, is for meat. I like to use my animals to their fullest potential. And so when I looked at the Kiko breed, we had got them, we started raising them a bit, and I realized a lot of the does had pretty good sized udders. So we started milking our Kikos. And some of ours have actually given up to 1 gallon a day, which is a lot for a meat breed. And, you know, then they worry about some of the meat breeds, they don't produce for very long, which I agree. You know, they tend to drop off probably about 6 months after giving birth. They'll start to really slow down. But we did have one doe this year that she kidded in December, and then we rebreed at the end of July. We always have our kids born in the wintertime. For whatever reason, it seems to make them stronger. Don't know what it is, and they seem to grow faster. We've tested it out, had some born all different types of year, and for whatever reason, winter kids seem to be the healthiest. But anyway, she got rebred in July, and then by last month, I was like, I gotta quit milking you because you're gonna have babies soon. So we're just gonna make you dry up. But she would not dry up. So you get those occasionally, those good, you know, diamonds in the rough, and they'll produce a lot better, you know, than some of the others. I've noticed that with the Kikos, though, we've had some where their genetics, they only make just enough milk for the kids, that's it. But then you have some that are overachievers. And so we've actually been working on a breed up program with our Kikos, and we're crossing in some high quality alpines into the Kiko breed, and then we're breeding them back into the Kikos up to purebred status. And so anyway, that way we can kind of better the dairy side, because when the Kikos were originally created, they used these feral goats from New Zealand, and they bred in Nubian, Toggenburg, and Saanen bucks over these feral does. Then they left them for 20 plus years out in the wild, let all the bad genetics die off, all the bad hooves, bad mothers, parasite problems, all that. They let them all die off, and then they started domesticating them, and that's how they created the Kiko breed. That is what kind of really fascinated me, because they're super, super hardy. So anyway, one of the other things that we realized on the Kikos is that they are actually producing a lot of cashmere. So it's a nice fiber, and a lot of people don't know this, but cashmere only comes from goats. Nothing else produces cashmere, but there's only about 3 breeds that produce enough cashmere to actually make it worth collecting. So in the spring, they just start shedding. You just go out there with a brush. We don't have to shear them or anything like that, which is really nice. And we sell it raw right from the goat to consumers. And then because they're so hardy, they're a great brush control goat. A lot of people use them just to clear land. The other breeder in Arizona, Reese Bickerdike, of Rio Verde, that's all he uses his Kikos for, is he leases them out to clear land. And so they just go out there. Because they have wild goat heritage, they can just kind of live off of drier vegetation. You know, they don't need all that, you know, they don't need all the grains and the high proteins and everything to survive. The Kikos are pretty hardy.
Doesn't that flavor the meat?
I haven't noticed a difference.
Really?
Yeah, the meat all tastes pretty much the same, because we've had some of ours that were just out in the pasture and they just grew, and we've eaten those. And then we've had some that were like does, because they get a little bit more nutrition than our bucks do, and we've eaten those and it all tastes the same to me. Yeah. So, you know, meat, dairy, brush control, cashmere, and then also a lot of people are getting into packing now. A lot of people used to use the mules and donkeys and stuff for packing, but they're starting to get into using goats. Goats do not spook as easily. They typically are not as stubborn. And if they get spooked, they usually run to you, not away, which is really nice. I have a friend up in Idaho, and he has a pack of about 22 string of goats, and he goes out hunting and everything with them. They pack out elk, and yeah, it's pretty cool. So the Kikos are really nice because they have so many things you can use them for, instead of just the dairy goat where you can just get dairy. Maybe you get some meat off of them, you know, but so that's kind of why we went with that breed. So you just have to find which what you want out of your animals and decide which breed is going to be best for your situation. And then feed wise, you know, do a lot of research, find out what's going to work best for whatever animal you're raising. The most important thing is a good quality feed, minerals. A lot of people don't think about minerals, but minerals are a really important part of their diet. Like with goats, we have, yeah, they sell the blocks of minerals that they use for cattle and stuff, but they're not adequate enough for goats. The goats need a loose mineral, and they need access to it 24/7. So we typically buy a nice loose mineral and then we keep it in a bucket and they can come and lick at it whenever they feel they need it. So I go through Premier One Supply, and they have one that was actually formulated specific for goats. It's the best one I've found. And so I just order it. It's like a 5-pound bag, and you mix it with 50 pounds of stock salt. And it's supposed to last 10 goats a year. So it goes pretty far. But we just keep out, you know, a scoop of the minerals. If they dump it, you know, you've kind of wasted it, because sometimes, you know, the animals won't lick it off the ground. But we always just make sure they have it available. So then you get into another reason to have the animals is, you know, breeding them. But then when you're breeding the animals, you have to decide, you're going to have all these babies. What are you going to do with them if they don't sell? You know, a lot of people get excited, you know, let's own some animals, and oh, I want babies. But then you get stuck with them. You know, a lot of people are a little afraid to eat them. But livestock is livestock. That's what they're for, you know. And so you have to know that if you're going to be breeding an animal, you have to have, you know, you're going to have the consequences of, what if they don't sell? What are you going to do with them? How are you going to rehome them, or where are you going to put them if you can't afford to feed them, or whatever. So it's really important that you know that you're going to have all these babies that may not sell, and you have to figure out what you're going to do with them, so you're not stuck with them, or they, you know, don't do well for you for whatever reason. So, and then, like I said earlier, not all animals are breeding quality, you know. So even though, like with us, we have our goats and we're breeding, you know, we have 27 pregnant, that could be 50 kids. You know, that's a lot of kids. I'd say the top 5% will keep, you know, and then the other top 5% will be quality breeders. But what about the rest? You know, that's a lot of kids. The good thing is we love goat meat, and so I don't mind putting them in the freezer.
You have goat meat for sale, right?
Yes, so we have looked into doing it legally, selling goat meat. Before, we would just give it away, let people try it, you know. But now, if we found a butcher, Malapai, is actually licensed and inspected. And if you go through them, and I've already talked to the Arizona Agricultural Department about me selling the meat after it's been processed, I can get a distributor's license. So as long as you do it through a licensed and inspected company, and then you get your distributor's license, you can sell it. Yeah, so we're just starting out. We just got a little bit of meat available now, so we're seeing how well it's going to do. So far, we've only had a few takers, but if anybody's interested in trying goat meat, let me know. It's delicious. So then we get to milking goats. You know, if you're into the milking aspect of it, this is where a lot of people don't know. Whenever you decide that you want milk, some people don't realize you have to breed to get them to be in milk. They don't just appear to be in milk when you're ready. So you're going to have to breed, which then you're stuck with kids. What are you going to do with those? So once you start milking goats, we typically will milk them as soon as the kids wean. Sometimes if they produce an over amount of milk, then we can start milking them earlier while the kids are still on there. But you have to milk every day, no matter what. No vacation. You can't just go out and do it when you want to. You have to milk them every single day. Doesn't matter what the weather is. If you're sick, you have to do it. Otherwise, they're going to dry up, right? And then you have to wait another year before they come back into milk after you've had more kids, and then you get to milk them then. So you have to know that, you know, when you decide to do milking, you have to do it every single day. Now, we used to do twice a day milking, and of course, the more you milk them, the more milk you'll get. But because, I have to go to work, and I have to be at work at 5 a.m. in show low, so I have to leave at 4 a.m. I'm not going to go outside at 3 a.m. to milk goats. That's just, so we do just once a day milking. So they cut back on how much milk they're producing when you're only milking once a day, because their body's saying, oh, you don't need that much, so I'm not going to produce that much. So, it just depends on how much milk you want. If like Wes, we just do once a day milking. So we're going to milk more goats so that way we can get more milk that way. Because Brandon doesn't like to milk goats. Yeah, put the blame on you. So then, looking into, with the animals, like with the goats, multiple sources of income, from the animals, like the Kikos, we can sell the breeders for quality stock, and we sell all over the US. And then we can sell the cashmere, so their hair, we can sell that. If you look into licensing, getting licensed for dairy products, you could sell milk, you can make soaps and lotions and all that kind of stuff. And then also leasing them out for brush control. So, there's all different types of ways to market your animals, just depending on how you're raising them and what all you can get from them.
You sell your milk?
No. I have sold it to people, like I had a guy that he had a horse, the mother died. And so I keep my colostrum also. If I have a doe that produced, her bag was huge and she nursed her triplets, and I still got a quart of colostrum after she had nursed those. And that is liquid gold. And so we freeze it in ice cube trays, and then we pop them out, put them in freezer bags, and we freeze those. And so we were able to give him colostrum, and then we gave him a whole bunch of milk. And I saw him a year later, and he thanked me because the horse survived. So that was pretty cool. So we have given it to people that needed it for puppies or horses or stuff like that. And then I have other people that'll buy it for their soaps and lotions and stuff like that, but not for human consumption. Yeah. And then you look at when you're marketing. So different ways of marketing. Like for us, we have a website. You guys can check us out at fishorpriceranch.com. I do have some business cards back behind you. If you guys are interested, you're welcome to grab a few. So, we have a website where you can check out all of our products, all of our animals, and we also do classes. So if anybody's interested in learning classes on how to raise specific animals, or like disease testing, hoof trimming, anything like that, we do all those types of classes. So you can check out our website. Also social media. You can go on social media and kind of promote your farm that way. But like Anita had said, we need to talk about, sometimes you get negative feedback. I just recently had one where I talked about how I always like to keep everybody in the loop that purchases from me or could be possible future purchasers. And so when I did a post the other day about I have officially added grain into our goats' diets, so I want everybody to know. And I just told them, I have my opinions. I didn't want to do any like really bad grains. In my opinion, I don't personally like corn, and I don't personally like cottonseed. But I want to do like a healthier grain like oats and stuff like that. And you couldn't believe the negativity I got because I said that these grains were bad. So you just have to learn how to kind of deal with that. Yeah, it's really hard sometimes because I had like 12,000 people see that post, and I only had a few that were really negative about it, but it's really hard sometimes to hold your tongue. And, so I'm just kind of like, if you don't like it, this is how I take care of my goats. I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but if you don't like it, just move on, have a great day. But sometimes it is really, really hard to be nice. But you have to remember that everybody's going to see your responses. And so even though it's very difficult to not say how you really feel, it's best to just kind of keep it short and simple and sweet and just, handle it that way. But anyway, so I do get a lot of people, Facebook's really nice because I have a ton of friends, and then I'm on a bunch of groups for the specific breeds of animals that I raise, all my rabbits, my pigs, my goats, everything. And so that's a good way to find more clientele, is to join all those groups and start sharing just your stories, or, oh, this is my favorite goat for this reason, or this, and a lot of people start following you. I've had people that still contact me about rabbits, and it's been many, many years since we've had that incident, back when we used to raise show rabbits. And I still have people try and ask for rabbits from me. So we have recently gotten back into them, but we're not going to be showing them. We just do it just for the meat and the pelts. But anyway, so social media is really nice to get your word out there. And I've noticed, when we first got into like the Kiko goats back in 2015, I'd put my goats out there for sale. And back then, Kikos were $200. Now we don't sell anything for less than 300, and that's not even with papers. My goats, they don't start with papers until they're $500-600. But back then, a lot of people, oh, it's a new breeder, they don't know what they're doing. So it takes years for you to get, a good reputation for breeding quality animals, and it takes a lot of time. And so, it takes a bit to get out there. But now that we're out there, we've been doing it for many years now. And so now we have a lot of people that follow us. And so we've started a YouTube channel, and we share everything to do with our farming. And we share educational videos on there. So if you guys want to check that out, it's also Fisher Price Ranch. And, we share all the good, the bad, and the ugly part of farming, So anybody have any questions?
You buy barley? Bulk barley?
Yes. Well, I buy the 50-pound bags.
Where do you get
Shantytown.
what?
Shantytown. It's over in Sholo.
In Sholo?
Yes. It's by that.
Is that the name of the shop?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pet food warehouse, Shantytown. Yeah, same thing. Right. I know. It's a Mexican food place.
I was thinking about making porridge.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people have said that they'll use the barley or the oats. Well, I got rolled oats, but they don't look like rolled oats to me. I think they grabbed the wrong bag. But anyway, they said, a lot of people said they'll use the barley, and they'll actually sprout it like fodder and then feed it, because you get more nutrition that way. Yeah. Yeah. So yes.
Have you ever had any problems with purchase or anything like that?
Yes. So we have had actually quite a few different ones. We one place we had bought feed from, which we still buy from, they had got a bad batch of hay, and it was moldy in the center. And sometimes you can't see that. And we buy the big square bales, and we just throw them out in the field, and they just eat them until they're gone. There is a lot of wasted hay that way, but we also don't mind it. It puts mulch into the soil. But when you pull onto the hay, you'll see white powder come out. That's mold, and it's not good. So you have to be really careful with that. No, I did have quite a few years ago when we lived in Vernon. We had two incidences. One, we got a really, I think it was first cutting alfalfa, which is really hot. And we had one goat that she ate too much, and she got really bloated. She was on the ground rolling. Her belly was huge. And so what we did was we just took baking soda and mixed it with a little bit of water and squirted it, drenched her with it. And then it just kind of breaks up the acids and everything. And luckily we saved her. She was fine. Yeah. Yeah. We all deal with it. Yeah. 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 Oh. Yeah. But we all have loss, Another one, I ended up with some hay that came in from Colorado many years ago. And we would just, like I said, we feed the whole bale. We don't cut it open. So we just threw it in the feeder back when we had feeders, and come home after both of us were at work all day, and the goats are screaming their heads off. And we're like, what? You have plenty of food. And I realized they're not eating it. And I'm like, what the heck? So I go through the bale, and it has all the stuff in it. And I have one baby over here seizuring. We lost her, and she passed away, but I found out it was loco weed, and it happens, because they're just out there with machinery cutting the bales and baling them with the machine. So they don't always see some of the stuff that's in the hay. Another one recently that we dealt with earlier this year was foxtails from another farm. And I've never dealt with foxtails. My goats eat cactus, so I didn't think anything of it. I'm like, it's fine, no big deal. I knew foxtails, but I've never dealt with it. So I didn't really register that it was probably bad for the goats. But it was really bad. We threw all the bales out in the field and they're out there just eating it, and then I started realizing they're losing weight, and then I go out in the field one day and one of the goats, the lips were all puffy. And I was like, what's going on? So I lifted up her lip and all the foxtails were stuck in her lips and she couldn't eat. And so what we had to do was we had already had all the hay out there. It was devastating. I was crying at work. They sent me home. They're like, get out of here. And so luckily I had a ton of volunteers come out. We had to burn all of our fields to try and eradicate the foxtails. And then we had 80 goats at the time, and we had to go through every single one's mouth to pull out all the foxtails. They're screaming and shaking and trembling with pain. It was the worst thing ever. And they're bleeding everywhere. I mean, it was horrible. It was one of the worst things I've ever dealt with. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was probably the worst thing I've ever dealt with. That was pretty hard.
There were 3 of us that buy the same.
Yeah.
Same feed store, and we all 3 lost animals.
Oh no.
And too bad for one because she lost a cow and the little calf.
Yeah.
And somebody else, and it's all within 3 weeks.
Yeah. Sometimes it's always good to mix up your hay. Like when we used to feed alfalfa hay, we would only throw so much out there and then we give them Bermuda so they aren't just eating all the alfalfa because it can be really rich. And so it's good to kind of mix it up a little bit. And then that kind of breaks up the acidity a little bit. Yeah. So now we just feed strictly Bermuda hay and we give alfalfa pellets because then it's, compact and it's not fresh, so it's not as hot. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Big was your ranch and Vernon compared to the one you have now, and what's the difference in the amount of animals?
So in Vernon, we only have 1 acre. And like I said, we did a lot of testing. So we had a lot of animals of each breed. So at one point we did have 56 goats on less than a half an acre for all the does and kids. We had 56. And everybody's like, you can't have that many. That's too confined. But it's actually funny because when people would come out there, they'd be like, oh my God, how much land do you have? You got like 5 acres here? And we're like, no, it's just 1. They're like, there's no way. But it's all in how you design it. So the way we had it, we call it their courtyard. So they have their little pen, but well, not little, I would say the size of this room. And we had their food, their water, their shelter, everything was in there. They had access to it 24/7. And then what we did was we had a chute, and off of that chute, we had pastures. So that 1/4 acre, we had split into 3 sections and we would rotate them. We actually planted, forage out there and everything. And everybody's like, you're going to get so many parasites. And to be honest, we were there for 5 years. We only dewormed 1 goat ever, but it's all about rotation, and then we always made sure the courtyard was clean. So, and then now we're on 36 acres. We're doing the same idea. So we have their courtyard, but now their courtyard is twice the size of this room. And then their pastures are 4 to 5 acres each. So we're giving just the girls alone, they have about 20 acres that we split into 5 pastures, and which we only have 2.5 done so far. We've only been on the property for just over a year. So we're still working on it, but the bucks have about 2 acres, the chickens have about 2 acres, and they just free range. And then the pigs have 1 acre. And then our rabbits are currently just in cages, but we're actually gonna build them a pretty good size area, like 100 by 100 roughly. And then they'll just free range out there. And we want to do colony style with the rabbits at some point. So.
Nothing online.
Okay.
But I do want to say, so a lot of times people ask, why do I pay farmers or ranchers to come present to this group? Because we have a really wide variety of different types and styles. And so I mean, I've followed Sarah since she first started, I was kind of starting too. And, you don't, until you watch farmers and ranchers go through the trials and tribulations, you don't understand how hard it is. It's really easy to watch YouTube or watch something and it looks so easy, you know, it's so effortless. You edit out like 90% of what it is.
That's why ours is so different, because I share everything. Like we just went through almost 3 weeks of trying to save one of my goats. She had suddenly just was really thin. She didn't feel good. We've been doing all this research. Even though we've been into goats this many years, we still research. There's always something you're going to learn. And, you know, we did all this and she got better and she started getting better and better. And then all of a sudden she went way downhill. It looked like she had a UTI. And this is when then I consulted with my veterinarian and he said, do this antibiotic. So we did that. She seemed to suddenly get better. And then the next day she was way downhill. Within an hour, she passed away. But I shared the whole thing because some people can learn from that. You know, so a lot of the time I've actually had a lot of my subscribers thank me for sharing the hard times, because a lot of people don't share those. And then how do you learn, you know?
Who's your vet?
Huh?
Who's your vet?
I use Despain.
Oh, you do use to
Mhm.
but he won't come out.
No, I typically do all my own vet care. But I take my dogs there and keep establishment with them and stuff like that. So.
Do you use Dr. Gus?
Mm-mm.
So I think it's amazing that you, Sarah, and that you guys have shared so much of your life with everybody as far as the farming thing. This is the beginning farmer rancher workshop, but there's a lot of people on here that have been farming and are just looking to, you know, reevaluate, get out of a crunch, just figure out what is, you know, realign their plans. And so with Pandora last week and Haley and Andrew's cattle company, and then with you this week for Fisher Price ranch, right?
Yeah.
I really thank you guys for being authentic and sharing your experiences, because I don't want anyone taking this class to think that everything's going to be smooth, but that you have a support network.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I know a lot of your volunteers have been your support network.
Yeah.
And kind of helped you out. And then Sandra did say thank you for sharing and your family's commitment to the heritage. So that was one. And then just so you know, Camilo said, I don't know, Sarah doesn't know this, but she is our mentor. We got our 4 lovely ladies from her and Brandon there, wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
So just so you know, we talked about you too. You don't know who you're talking.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing, and thank you for everything. And definitely if you guys can check out the YouTube channel. It's so much work to do YouTube.
It is.
We're editing.
I'm just glad I have internet now.
It's insane. So, you know, she's dedicated. The other thing is I don't answer homesteading questions, and I just can't. It's not my area. I'm a farmer. Sarah's really great. They literally are definition of homesteading. You know, I mean, so if you have questions, reach out to them and they might be able to help you on that homesteading side. I can do the U of A extension and all that good stuff, but you also have people in the community that they speak the language already.
Yeah.
You know, so just reach out to them. I did post online your information. They have cards, and just support them in what they're doing.
Yeah, we have a lot of really good workshops. A lot of people learn a lot. We have a specific goat workshop. We have, birds, we have rabbits, and then we do hoof trimming, disease testing. We teach you how to do like blood draws for yourself, because going to a vet, it does get costly, and it is hard to make a living when you're constantly having to go to the vet for help and pay all that money, so we teach you how to do everything yourself, which is really nice. We had to learn, unfortunately, the hard way. So now we just share what we've learned over the years.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, guys.